Greetings, fellow book lovers, and welcome back to Colin's Corner. Today, guys, we are going to go over everything that I read in the month of April. So without any messing around, let's get right into it. So I read 5 books in April, and we'll go over the physical books that I read, and we will also go over the audiobooks that I read. So the first book that I read in April was, to kick off the month, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Now, last year I read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell with a couple of friends outside of BookTube and the book community, just real life friends, and I absolutely loved it. It was a chunker. It was very engaging for me, and I actually read it kind of hybrid. I did a lot of it physically and a lot of it on audio as well while I was traveling back and forth to work. And I really enjoyed Clarke's style. I enjoyed the tone that she used, the humor. She's very witty. She's a extremely talented writer. So I was a bit shell-shocked when I got to Piranesi. It is not like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, not in a bad way. I really was surprised by this book. It is without a doubt the most unique setting I have ever read. And the amount of mystery and food for thought that Clarke is able to pack into a book that I believe is less than 250 pages, it astounded me. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because I think I'm going to do a dedicated review for Piranesi. Maybe it's a difficult book to talk about in a spoiler-free fashion, but I think I'm going to give it my go because, guys, I really enjoyed it, and I would like to kind of try to formulate some thoughts around that. The next book that I read in the month of April was The Way of Edan by none other than Philip Chase, otherwise known in our little sphere of the internet as Dr. Fantasy. Now, this was my first foray into self-published books. And I have got to say that I could not have hoped for a better experience. This book really worked for me on a lot of levels. I enjoyed the plot a lot. It was something new for me. It was fresh for me, the whole Holy War. And I enjoyed many of the characters, and especially the themes that Chase explores. And so I do have a dedicated review on this. I'm not going to harp on it for too long. If you would like my more in-depth thoughts on this book and just what my overall experience was, I will put the link to my The Way of Edan review down in the description of this video. Needless to say, I was blown away by the quality of both the contents of the book and the physical book itself. And it definitely has gotten me extremely excited to get into self-pub books. It's going to definitely be a priority for me and for the channel. I hope to get to more this year for sure. And the last physical book that I read in April was Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. Now, as many of you know, if you've been watching the channel, I read the Farseer Trilogy last summer, and then I actually, in preparation for the Live Ship Traders, reread it on audio in the beginning of this year, and I loved Farseer. I loved Fitz, and I think that the reason that I was putting Live Ship Traders off for so long was because I knew that we were not going to be going back to Fitz and the crew from Farseer. I was wrong. I should not have waited this long to read Live Ship, and I should not have doubted that Hobb would draw me in. Hobb just has a way of speaking to me personally. I really love her writing style, and I happen to love most of her characters. If you are nervous about getting into this because it isn't following Fitz and you're a fan of Fitz, let me be the first to tell you, well, scratch that. Let me be the millionth person to tell you, don't wait. If you enjoyed Farseer, read Live Ship. Please don't skip it. I've only read Ship of Magic so far, and it absolutely blew me away. There was a point, I enjoyed even the beginning of the book, but once it hit, I think it was around 100, 150 pages, Once I hit this point, I was gone. I could not put this book down. I lost a lot of hours of sleep reading this one. So I actually had a live discussion over on Ben's channel, Books with Bengus Khan, and it really helped me to get even more out of this amazing work of fiction. Next, let's talk about the audiobooks that I read this month. Now, I got through 2 audiobooks. The first was A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. Now, if you guys didn't already know, am reading through A Song of Ice and Fire for the first time. And it is every bit as compelling and entertaining as everybody has said that it is. And I did watch the show as it was airing. Well, I was a few seasons late, I think, but I did watch the show, and I had no concept of what events in the show happened in what books because I hadn't yet read the books when I watched the show. I was reading this book, and I mean, I remember a lot of a lot of the plot that happens in A Storm of Swords. I remember a lot of it from the shows. I had no idea how much stuff happened in this specific book. And I was like, there's no way. I could see the plot lines as I was reading through this. I could see the plot lines lining up. And I just kept thinking to myself, there's no way Martin is going to be able to cram all of these pivotal plot events into this book and make it not seem like it's crammed or rushed. And he did. This book absolutely amazed me. I could not stop listening to this book. I was listening to it when I was working. I would come home. I would help put our daughter to bed. I would hang out with my wife, and I would literally be like, she'd be watching TV. I'd be laying in bed with the phone like tucked under my ear so she couldn't hear it. And I was just listening. I was like, I have to know what's going to happen next. So I'm going to be continuing, maybe not right away in May, but I will be continuing with A Song of Ice and Fire definitely this year. I loved this book. It quite possibly is objectively the best fantasy novel that I have ever read. Maybe subjectively too. There's a lot of recency bias going on here. But just objectively, it was absolutely, I mean, I really think objectively it is probably the best fantasy novel I have ever read. The last audio that I read this month was Gwendy's Button Box. I did not love this one. This did not work for me on almost every level. Now, I will put a disclaimer in here saying that, you know, I didn't go into this with high expectations. Not that I thought it was going to be bad. I know there are certainly fans of the Gwendy series out there, but it typically is not touted as one of King's more loved works. And this one, like I said, it didn't work for me on almost every level. I was not invested in the main character. I was not even really that invested in the villain, and I usually get really invested in villains. The plot did not do it for me, and that probably is a product of not really caring about the characters all that much, because I didn't really care what was going to happen to them. Luckily, it was pretty short, so I wrote it out. I thought, you know, maybe it might get better, and I probably will someday continue with the series, because I do plan on reading all of King's works at some point, but this is definitely not going to be a priority for me. Hey, I tried it. This might be the first book I've talked about on the channel that I just really didn't like that much. But it happens. If you love it, it's nothing personal, but this one just did not work for me, guys. Lastly, guys, I just want to take a quick minute here to say thank you to a couple of authors who sent me books. I don't really do book hauls on the channel, but I do want to take time, and I think the wrap-up videos might be the best time to do this, to just publicly thank some of the authors that sent me books. The first of which I got from Keon Ardalan. I actually won. He hosted a Twitter poll for a signed copy of the 11th Cycle. Keon was wonderful to work with over Twitter. Very, very kind, very responsive, and he signed the book for me. Let's see if I can get this to focus. I stink at getting the camera to autofocus. Yeah. So thank you, Keon. I'm really looking forward to this. A lot of booktubers that typically my tastes align with really enjoyed this book. So I'm definitely going to get to this one at some point this year. Beautiful artwork on the cover, very, very good quality. I'm extremely impressed with these self-published books and the quality of them. And next, an author named Frank W. Janus reached out to me over email. Also a very, very kind guy. Offered to send me his book and asked if I would read it. I don't know when I'm going to get to this. It is called A Bringer of Light, and I don't know too much about this, so if you guys have heard of this book or read it, please let me know in the comments. I believe it is a historical fantasy type of, well, okay, so the front says a new scientific romance. Now, I don't want that to get misconstrued because right on the inside flap, it does say, and on the back, it says it is a story in a style inspired by Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. So if you guys have read those authors, this might be something that's for you. I think we're dealing with multiple timelines and kind of surrounding maybe the World War II era. And there's that, and then there's two other timelines. And I think they all converge at some point. So it sounds exciting. Like I said, I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I definitely wanted to tell Frank, thank you for this book. Again, wonderful, wonderful quality, beautiful cover art. I'm just impressed. I'm impressed with these self-published books. And, you know, these are giving me even more of a reason to make self-published more of a priority. That's going to do it for my April wrap-up. And now it is time for my favorite segment. I know there's 3 or 4 of you out there that like this, but this is my favorite segment, Comedy with Colin. Today's joke, guys. How do you make a tissue dance? If you think you know the answer, drop it down in the comments below. Guys, if you have read anything that I've talked about here today or plan on reading it, let me know what you thought or how excited you are to get to some of this stuff. I really appreciate you staying and hanging out. If you liked the video today, please give it a like. If you're enjoying the content on the channel so far, please consider subscribing because it's greatly appreciated and helps me out a lot. I hope you're all enjoying what you're reading, and remember, you're always welcome in Colin's Corner.